a conversation on depression. And tonight I am joined by two guests who are both experts in this field, and they will be helping me to have this conversation with you. And as usual, this conversation is sponsored by MTN through Ayo. Ayo is an insurance business which is operated and run by MTN. So tonight, we also have a special treat for yourselves. We will be running a competition. So I will play a video. I'll play it twice, and then I'll be asking you questions, two questions from that video. And we'll be selecting four winners, and each of the winners will walk away with talk time with 100 kwacha. So tonight, pay attention to that. In the meantime, do tell us where you're watching us from. We're interested to know where you're watching us from. And also, at some point, we will open this conversation for questions. So feel free to ask questions. All right? Feel free to ask questions, and don't feel inhibited to ask us all manner of questions. But before we go any further, a quick message from our sponsors. And as you listen to this very, very short video, pay attention to the details, because both questions where people win prizes will come from this particular short video. So I'll play you this video now, and listen in very carefully. And then at some point, I'll ask you questions. And the people who get the answer right will win themselves 100 kwacha talk time.
What can you do with 5 kwacha? Not a lot. A 5 kwacha auto boost can get you 1,900 kwacha extra Ayo cover. Bernard Mulindu auto boosted, and Bernard received a total payout of 2,070 kwacha when he needed it most. Here is Bernard's story.
My name is Bernard Mulindu. I am from Moto. Kairi hospital check. The pipe on a problem 296 cash. Ngasanya kwa chat. Tumitumira ko 2 Kaira manda kusongera tukara mukurazishi yako datawole bomba. Alipira kwa nabana ku masuku. Aba bali bomben tuisuma sana.
Dial *296# to auto boost and quickly grow your Ayo recharge with care cover each time you recharge. Ayo, together with MTN. Ayo, because you care.
There you have it. And so I hope that you were paying attention. So as we go along in this conversation, I will ask you some of the questions from that video. And I hope that the winners, or rather the people that will have won, will be able to be announced here. So we are looking for 4 winners. So before we get started, here is your first question, and you can answer in the comments section. And this question is based on the video I just played. How much can a 5 kwacha auto boost get you in my health cover on the Ayo insurance? And the answer is in that video. So those of you who watched the video, go ahead and type your answers, and at some point we'll play the video again and ask you the second question. So that said, let's go straight into the conversation as I bring into the studio my panelists, and so that we can get on with the conversation. First into the studio is Dr. Lekani Venevivi. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone.
Right, let me also introduce the next panelist, and the next panelist is Dr. Jonathan Chinyama. Doctor, welcome. Dr. Chinyama, could you do something to your audio? We can't hear you.
I think it's muted. I need to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, Dr. Mjajati, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you very much.
Right, so let's go straight into our conversation. Now, before we go into this discussion, Tonight we are discussing a very important subject, and we are talking about depression. So now, before we go deep into this conversation, I'd like that the people who are following this conversation, first of all, to have a fair understanding of who you gentlemen are. I'm getting feedback. Thank you. So I would like our followers and viewers to know who the panelists are. So Dr. Venevivi, if you could go ahead and just introduce yourself, and then after you are done introducing yourself, Dr. Chinyama will introduce himself so that people know who we are talking to. Dr. Venevivi.
All right, so thank you very much. As shown on the screen, my name is Lekani Venevivi. I am actually a psychiatrist with a number of years of practice behind me. So I've served both at Chainama Hills Hospital, which is the biggest mental health service provider that we have in the country right now, and also Ndola Teaching Hospital, which is the second largest. I've actually been a head of department at that in Ndola Teaching Hospital, psychiatry department. So I'm currently based on the Copper Belt, though I've stepped away from public practice right now, but I am on the Copper Belt, and as and when people are in dire need, they're able to reach out and get me. So sometimes we've met with other people. I've also, in terms of me lecturing, so at some point I lectured in two, three different universities, one being UNILAS, the other being CBU and Nkana. So yeah, I've been around with a lot of experience behind me. So thanks.
Right, thank you, Doctor. Dr. Chinyama, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Jonathan Chinyama. I'm a clinical psychologist and a former Zambia Army military officer. I am currently a lecturer at Eden University, where I teach mental health and psychiatry, and also do consultants with the CIDES as their head consultant for mental health and psychiatry. And I also do voluntary work with the Zambia Correction Facility, where we do rehabilitate inmates who have mental health and psychiatric disorders. Thank you.
Excellent. So like I told you, that I'm joined by experts in their field with years of experience in this area of depression and any other mental illness. So these colleagues are mental health experts. So tonight we are dealing with the subject relating to depression. And to start us off, Dr. Venevivi, do tell us, when people say somebody is depressed or depression, what is depression?
All right. So the term depression has both the medical use of the term depression and also the regular English use of the term depression. And in most cases, you'll find people will use maybe when they're feeling sad on one particular day, they'll tell you, I'm feeling depressed, or they'll, you know, when they've had a fight or something bad has happened, they'll tell you that they feel depressed, when maybe they just may mean it in terms of a period of sadness that they are going through, and usually it doesn't last long, and it responds maybe to a change of circumstances and they get better. But when we talk about depression from a medical point of view, we are talking about someone who, again, there are two main parts that will characterize depression. We are talking about someone who has a low mood, a persistent low mood, almost all day and most days of the week. So it's that thing where you are, okay, for lack of a better word, let's just call it permanently sad. It's like very little happens that lifts you out of that sad feeling, and it happens, you have that feeling throughout the day. And then coupled with that sad feeling, that feeling of being low or having a very low mood, as we say, of that feeling of the deep sadness that we are talking about, it also comes with a significant loss of interest in things that are either pleasurable or things that general engagement out there. So you know how we are all football fans in okay, most of us are football fans in Zambia, and apart from Arsenal supporters who I know from time to time usually get those feelings of being disinterested in the game. Most of us have a team we cheer. But then you find that because you've been feeling sad, your team is doing very well, but you've suddenly lost interest in cheering that team. Or if I suddenly lost interest in a number of things that you find pleasurable, you are no longer hanging out with your friends, you are no longer interacting with your family members, and even in terms of your work, you are no longer zealous to push in your level best. So the ones in medical terms, they'll call it anhedonia, so a significant loss of interest or pleasure in things that were previously interesting. And then coupled with that,
yeah, go on.
Yeah, so coupled with that, I was going to say with the low mood comes also other features such as a loss of appetite or an increase in appetite, such that, and other people tell you, I'm stress eating. So if you find that someone is in a feel is having this depressed feeling, and so they'll either start to eat more or they'll eat less, such that it even results in a significant change in weight, whether it's up or down. They will start, most people will tell you they feel tired all the time. They wake up in the morning, they're already tired. They don't have the energy to go through with the day. So you generally have low energy that you can't carry on with. You don't have enough drive to carry out your activities of the day. People also, a number of times, will report a disturbance in sleep. Some people will tell you, I sleep too much. But other people will tell you, when I sleep, I actually run out of sleep. So I'm awake from 01 up until maybe 05 or 6 when I'm supposed to be getting ready for work. Maybe that's when I feel tired. And so by the time I'm going for work, I'm tired. And then,
right. So it sounds like you've already gone into the issues of the symptoms and features.
Yes.
I think we'll come back to that question. Okay. So at this stage, we just want people to know, like, what is the definition of depression?
Okay.
Yeah, like because again, Dr. Chinyama, could you just add to what the doctor has said? What is the definition? What's the definition of depression?
Yeah, so like Dr. Venaviv indicated, depression is simply in a simple way is that it's when someone has a sustained low mood for most of the time during the day for at least a period of 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And this low mood should be able to interrupt or interfere with the activities of daily living of this particular individual.
Right. Now, starting with yourself, Dr. Chinyama. How often do you see people presenting with depression in your line of work? How often do you see this problem?
I would say depression is actually very, very common in our setup, be it in the correctional facility. If you go even in our health facilities, depression is very common, and it cuts across in the young age, the adolescents, male adults, even and women. So it cuts across. In short, Dr. Mjajata, I would say that depression is very, very common in our society.
Dr. Venaviv, how common is depression in your line of work?
All right. So as Dr. Chinyama has put it, depression is actually very common. And okay, so not only is it common, but it's also underdiagnosed, so to say, because a lot of people that have depression will not know that they are actually depressed per se. They will find different things to explain it, and it will even present differently. You know, there's several times when people come to you thinking that they have a headache or they have a stomach ache, or they'll tell you they can't sleep and they think that's the only problem they have. And yet when you go into the details of the history, you discover they are depressed. So depression is actually very common. And I know that we have this misconception that depression doesn't happen here in Zambia. It doesn't happen a lot in Black people. But literature actually shows that it's even more common in us than people who are coming from the affluent world. So it is very common, if I must say.
Right. Now, how would someone know that they are depressed? You know, so what are the symptoms? For example, both in myself, if I'm depressed, how would I even know that I'm depressed? Or in my relative or my loved one, how would I know that they're depressed? So, what are the symptoms of depression? What are the signs of depression? I'll start with you, Dr. Vivi, then I'll go to Dr. Chia.
All right. So like I earlier on pointed out, and Dr. Chinyama added to that, it's like one of the commonest like the features you get is a persistent low mood. So if you're feeling low all day, most days, especially if it extends beyond a period of 2 weeks, chances are that that is depression. And then if you find that things that you, okay, so now I must qualify it quickly here and say that as Doc mentioned, depression actually cuts across all ages. So while in adults it will present mainly with a low mood, in children it might present with an irritable mood. So you just find a child becomes irritable, that can be pointing you to depression. Okay, and then that is coupled with a loss of interest in these other things. So both yourself or when you see someone that one seems low most of the times and they're starting to isolate themselves, not doing the things that they like doing, all those things like we call hobbies, things that you're always looking forward to doing as and when you get some free time, you find that you're no longer interested in them, you're no longer engaging them, or your relative no longer engages with you, especially for the adolescents. I would say you have this favorite cousin of yours who you want to play your PlayStation with all the time, and then suddenly you find that they've lost interest in that PlayStation. They're starting to isolate themselves. They're starting to feel like, you know, like even when you, so I'm mixing it up because even when, as an individual, you start to feel as though you are alone, isolated, as even when you're surrounded by people. So those are some of the telltale signs of depression. So the other ones, like I said, another common feature that will bring people to see me is they'll tell me that they have a disturbance in their sleep. So you find that when you go to bed at 01, or, you know, like sometimes you fall asleep just fine, but within a short time you run out of sleep and you're awake the whole night, maybe till morning. And by the time you're waking up, you haven't had restful sleep, you're tired. You have fatigue all the time. In terms of libido, it also goes down. The very poor libido, you can't concentrate, or your concentration and effort at work becomes poor, or, you know, whereby you can't sustain your focus on one thing. So all those would help point to depression.
Dr. Chinyama, any thoughts? What are the signs and symptoms of depression? Anything to add?
Yes,
what the doctor has given?
Yes, Dr. Venaviv has talked about most of them. I'll just also add that people that are depressed tend to have
Hello, Dr. Chinyama, you're off.
Behavioral symptoms. Okay, I'm sorry, my network was misbehaving. So I was saying that they tend to have physical symptoms, then they tend to have behavioral symptoms, and what we would call cognitive symptoms or psychological symptoms. Sometimes these individuals look at themselves. So when they look at themselves, there is that feeling of worthlessness, like they are not worth being human beings. They look at themselves, they look at their lives, and they feel like they're worthless. Then two, if they look at the environment, or they look at the future, their life, they think that there's absolutely nothing. It's bleak. There's no hope. So they see hopelessness in their situation. And when they look at the bigger picture, the world, they cannot also see, they think like the world is against them. There's nothing good about this world. That's the cognitive triage. And when you combine these symptoms, now it makes this person who is depressed to start thinking that after all, I'm not worth living, I'm worthlessness, my future holds nothing, and the world is against me. Then they become suicidal. Now they start thinking, it's better I just die. And then suicidal ideations come in. Yeah, I think that's what I can add.
I think both of you have raised very important issues with regards to depression that I need you to touch on as well. Is the issue of, can depression make you physically sick, Dr. Chinyama?
Yes, it can, Dr. Mjajati. In medical terms, they call it body dichotomy, the body-mind dichotomy. What affects the body affects the mind, and what affects the mind affects the body. So yes, when you have depression, like Dr. Venavivi talked about, is that some people will tend to lose appetite. And when they lose appetite, they will not have the energy. In medical terms, they might even have malnutrition, and they'll present with physical symptoms, like Dr. Venavivi had indicated. Someone will just come and tell you that they have a headache. Someone will come and just tell you, I cannot sleep. Someone will tell you, I feel like I do not have the energy, they are fatigued. Yes, they will present with physical symptoms, when in the actual sense, the problem they have is actually depression.
Dr. Venavivi, which organs or which body parts would commonly get sick because of depression, as in physically sick? What type of diseases do you commonly see that present because someone is depressed?
Okay, so I like how you say how you've put the question. So again, there's no specific organ that will be damaged by depression per se. It's not like if like if there's a problem with a kidney, I'll do a test and maybe test the blood and it shows, I'll do a scan and it will show that there's a problem with the kidney. With depression, this happens at a very functional level in the brain. Yes, some chemicals will be imbalanced and the like, and then it will cause you to become depressed. But then it will manifest differently in different people. So like some of the examples I gave, it's where someone will present to you with a headache. So it doesn't mean that there's head damage per se, but they will have a headache, of which when you investigate, you do all the tests of things that can cause you a headache, you don't find anything. They will tell you, I have this, my heart is always racing. Sometimes they'll tell you, I have this hollow feeling that I get inside. Like just different symptoms. Like maybe some people will just tell you, I have pain. I have pain all over my body, and you can't explain it. Okay, so it's different in different people, and no major organ is damaged per se. So most of the tests that we even do is just to confirm that, because again, as Dr. Chinyama mentioned, to say that what affects the mind affects the brain and ultimately the body. Okay, then what affects the body will also affect the brain and ultimately the mind, because the three are closely interconnected. So there are times that we'll think, is there maybe an organ which is not working very well and causing that symptom maybe to appear like it's depression? So we'll test to make sure that all these other organs are functioning well. Okay, just to rule it out, not that it will always be a problem. So to answer the question, no major organ damage, but it's just that it will present, like one will come and tell you, I have a stomachache, one will tell you pain in the body, others will tell you, I am weak. There are people who've actually come in at some point, they are paralyzed. And then when you test, like neurologically, there's nothing wrong. You take a history, it points to depression. So the presentation can quite vary.
Because you know why I asked this question? People who are depressed, you will find that their sexual function is also affected, where you find that they can't even get an erection.
Yes.
They can't even have sex. Now, I want both of you to comment on issues of depression vis-a-vis sexuality and sexual function.
Doc, go first.
All right.
Dr. Chinyama.
Yes. It's not that the sexual organs become dysfunctional. They are not affected. But like we had alluded to the fact that what affects the mind affects the body. So when someone is depressed, Dr. Venaviv talked about losing interest in pleasurable activities. Most of the pleasurable activities that the individual used to find joy in are lost. And one of the activities where individuals who are depressed tend to lose interest is sex. And because they are thinking they are worthless, they are hopeless, there's no hope in their life, so they are preoccupied with these distorted thoughts about their current situation, that also tends to affect their libido. And I'm sure Dr. Venaviv who may agree with me that it's a very common symptom where people come and say, like in men, they'll say, I cannot maintain an erection. One of the things that you want to find out is whether they are depressed. So it's not that the sexual organs had become dysfunctional, no. It's just that this person now, it's in the mind. Remember, this is an injury to the mind, which we might not physically see. And so this has an effect also on how they have to think about sex. You know, sex is also in the mind. It's not in the sexual organs. And so that tends to bring down their libido levels. Thank you. I think Dr. Venaviv can add.
Dr. Venaviv, your thoughts on this matter?
All right. So as Dr. Chinyama has put it, you know, when we start discussing the topic of sex, even when we are teaching medical students, what I would tell them is that the biggest organ that you have that participates in sex and is the main player is your mind, your brain. Okay. So it all starts and ends in the brain. Now, remember that when we talked about just first of all, look at the process of sex. It needs you to have an interest, as Dr. Chinyama has put it. When you're depressed, interest goes. It needs you to have the drive. So when you're depressed, that drive goes. It also needs you to have the energy to put in. It's not like you're just going to be there and be passive. You need to, push in energy into it. But when you're depressed, your energy is low. Then the other thing I talked about is concentration. When you are depressed, your mind is wandering. You're always focusing on different things. So you find that your concentration is gone. So it means that even when you engage in sex, you are not going to give it your all. Now, what will commonly happen, and I also remember that is where some people even play psychology on us and say, I'm giving you a booster. Sometimes it's just a placebo, but because you believe you've taken a booster, you will say, okay, my sexuality has improved. It's because those guys who sell you such products understand the power of your mind. So they just give you energy in the mind, power in the mind to say you're going to perform, and you feel confident that you'll perform. So when you are depressed, that confidence is gone because you have low self-esteem. You know, me, where I come from in Eastern Province, people will say, Nangandiseani, who are we? You understand? So you feel like you're not bringing anything. You're not bringing in anything to the table. So again, and we all know that the moment there's no self-esteem, no self-confidence, then the sex itself is destroyed. So the organs won't get damaged. It's the mind that is not working, thereby affecting the performance of the organ.
Next issue that both of you touched on that I'd like us to get into quite a bit has to do with self-harm, suicide attempt, and suicide itself. Dr. Chinyama, in your line of work, can you discuss this issue of suicide and suicide attempt as it relates to depression?
Yes, it's a very common symptom, and actually other people tend to even go further to actually commit suicide. So one of the things that happen when someone is depressed is once they isolate themselves, they cannot interact with their peers. Then two, they've lost interest in things that used to keep them busy, things that used to uplift them. And then they lose self-esteem. They look at the world being against them. They look at their life being worthless, and they can't see hope in the future. They reach a point where they declare that there's no meaning in them to continue living. So at that point, the only solution that comes to their mind is to kill themselves. So people who actually plan, and you can even see it, those people, if you are close to this person, you can actually start seeing some of these early warning signs that they might plan to kill themselves. Others will even attempt to kill themselves. Others go to an extent of actually carrying out the suicide plan, and then they kill themselves. This is very common. And I must say that we are even seeing this in post-COVID people that have been discharged from COVID centers. When you start offering therapy, you find that they had reached actually a point where they thought it's better just to die because they have no hope. So in short, suicide is very common in people that are depressed. And it becomes, I think Dr. Benavivi has dealt with many of those, that once someone thinks of committing suicide, that becomes an emergency. Because eventually, if they're not attended to, they'll go ahead and complete their plan.
Dr. Benavivi, your comment on that. Suicide attempt, suicide and depression.
All right. So I'll like Doc has put it very well. All I'll add is that remember that depression happens in different settings, and again, as it happens in different settings, it will also present differently with different consequences. So yes, you have talked about suicide and talked about it very well, but there's also another aspect that we need to always bear in mind when it comes to death and depression. And that is also homicide, or you can even call it suicide homicide, because remember that depression, like again, happens in different settings. I think you may have had this topic, which was postnatal depression. I can't remember, but I think I remember mentioning it.
I mentioned it. Go on.
Yeah. So in a setting where you have postnatal depression, here's a mother that feels very low, feels very incapable of looking after their child, and thinking that this baby will suffer with me as a mother. So maybe they don't deserve to suffer, because that's the kind of thinking that characterizes depression. So you find that they might end up killing that baby, kill themselves. Sometimes we've had people who actually go on to kill the entire family. They have children and they've reached which end they're depressed. So you find that they kill there are even other surviving children, other family members, as a way of trying to get them out of this hopeless situation. So yes, suicide is very common, but also there are cases which are homicides that have been homicide plus suicide that have been as a result of undiagnosed or poorly treated depression. I also need to note that suicide is also the second leading cause of death in the young productive age group. So you're talking about people who are aged between 15 and 49. Yes, accidents will cause them to die, but other than accidents, so the second leading and non-natural cause of death is suicide. So that also helps us see how common depression is and how often we let it seep through the cracks and it goes untreated. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's quickly get a message from our sponsors and ask the second question to the people who are following this. Then when we come back, here's what we're going to address. Causes of depression, treatment options, and issues related to that. So let's hear from us.
What can you do with 5 kwacha? not a lot. A 5 kwacha Auto Boost can get you 1,900 kwacha extra IO cover. Bernard Mulindu auto boosted, and Bernard received a total payout of 2,070 kwacha when he needed it most. Here is Bernard's story.
My name is Bernard Mulindu. Waimpongera na moto. Kaeni kwa hospital check. Itakuwa ipo na problem 296 hash. Tunasanya kwa chat. Wametumira kwa 2 pilisebe. Kaile manda kusongera tukala mkuradiki yako dataole bomba. Alipira kwa nabana ku masku. Walipigwa wale bombenchi tulisuma sana.
Dial *296 hash to auto boost and quickly grow your IO recharge with care cover each time you recharge. IO together with MTN. IO, because you care.
There you have it, and let's give you the second question. We hope you were listening. So, the second question is, IO is real. Bernard Mulindu auto boosted for my health cover. How much was his total payout? I'll read the question again. Put your answers in the comment section and we will pick the winners. Tonight we're going to pick 4 winners who are going to win Talk Time, 100 kwacha Talk Time to each of the 4 winners. So the second question is, IO is real. Bernard Mulindu auto boosted for my health cover. How much was his total payout? So, ladies and gentlemen, those are your questions, and we'll go back to our conversation and finish. Let me bring back the doctors back into the conversation. Right, doctors. Dr. Chinyama, we can't see you. Where are you? Are you here? Oh, there you are. Excellent.
Yes, I am, Doc.
Beautiful. Now, let's get into the second segment of the conversation before we start taking questions from the people who are listening to us. What causes depression? Maybe let me put it this way. Maybe before we go to the causes, what are the risk factors of depression? Who is likely to get depressed? I think the question is clear. We'll start with you, Dr. Venevivi. Who is likely to get depressed?
Okay, so I don't want to get beaten here, but I'll tell you that poor people. So again, when I say this in terms of poor people, you know, I want it to sink in people's minds so that it is always thought about. You know, those people who have a very difficult life to live, those who are hardly making it in life, difficult, you know, like that, the people who have to worry about what they will eat tomorrow. Okay, so now it's not just poor in that we are talking about someone who lives in poor settings, but even in a country where generally you look at Zambia, most of us can actually be classified as poor. So third world settings with very poor health infrastructure, very poor social services, very poor support for all these other things that you need will tend to push you into depression. So that is one of the major risks that we need to think about. And by me saying so, I just want us to know that depression is real and it affects each and every one of us here in Zambia. I'm not saying everyone has it, but everyone it affects. So because I know that either you know someone who has depression or you might be personally suffering with depression. Now, when we go to textbook kind of things, we are talking. It is known that the older you get, the higher the chances of you getting depression. That doesn't exclude children from getting depressed, but people of advanced age are likely to have depression. Some people have even said, you know what, every time you see someone with geriatric, just think about them being depressed and, you know, give them an antidepressant to make them happy, because advanced age tends to be coupled with depression. Maybe that explains why my grandmother would have diseases of things that would walk, maybe in the body, crawling from the leg into the mind. So, you know, all those strange things that elderly people complain about, think about depression. Don't always be quick to, you know, do all those scans and expensive tests when we are overlooking the simple fact that someone might be depressed. Then again, please don't beat me. It's what research says, but the female gender is more predisposed to developing depression. So again, some papers have gone on to say that we females are twice as likely to get depression compared to males. Others have said 1 to 3 or the like, but just know that the female gender is more predisposed to depression. Again, I don't want to say women are a weaker vessel, but remember the hormones and everything, the constitutional aspects of it might play a role and hence causing depression. Then now all the other things will be like stress and all your living conditions, but I want to hand it over to Dr. Chinyama so that he adds to it as well.
Yes, Dr. Chinyama, what are the risks? Yes. Who is likely to develop depression?
Yes, Dr. Venavivi has summarized it all, but I could add that if you add what Dr. Venavivi has talked about, is that the causes are categorized in 3. There are biological causes of depression, which has to do with genetics. So sometimes you find that depression runs in families. So if there is a history of depression in your family, then you are also at risk. It doesn't mean you are going to be to get depression, but you'll be at risk. Then we have social factors, which Dr. Venavivi talked about. He talked about issues to do with poverty, social factors. He mentioned about women. Some of the factors that cause depression in women is the inequality, the workload, and things like that. And we also have psychological problems that can cause depression. To add also is that it has been found that people who have married before are at risk of getting depression. I'm not saying everyone who's married.
So married we shouldn't get married. Is that what you're saying? Doctor, not properly. So we shouldn't be getting married. So marriage is a risk for depression. Yeah? That's what
marriage is a risk, especially for those who have married before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So God.
Yes, those who have married before actually they were found to they are at risk of developing depression. So if we combine all that we've talked about with Dr. Venavivi, you find that there are biological factors, social factors, and psychological factors.
Excellent. Now, gentlemen, you've gone through the risk factors. Now let's go through the causes. What can cause depression? Starting with you, Dr. Chinyama, then we go to Dr. Venavivi.
So what would cause depression? I will not go into the medical part of it. I think Dr. Venavivi will explain that. But what would actually cause depression is when people are faced with a situation and then they fail to handle that particular situation, you can go into depression. Remember, all of us
like losing an election.
Like losing an election, yes. Losing a loved one, a bereavement, yes. Losing a job, being divorced, being exposed to a traumatic, life-threatening event, that would cause depression. Now, remember, we all have gone through some of these issues that we are discussing, but some people fail. They develop distorted thinking about their situation, and they hence develop, or they go into depression.
Gentlemen, I lost a job in very dramatic fashion, and I can confess that I did experience something similar to what you're describing. Yeah, Dr. Venavivi, what can cause depression?
All right, so Dr. Chinyama again has put it very well. The only addition I would want to make is that sometimes we don't even know what causes the depression. And this again is very important because I've heard people say, but that person was rich, they had money, they were happily married. You know, like someone has what they portray that they are living a perfect life and everything, they have everything that one would aspire for in life, and there's no problem, but someone still gets depression. So, so depression can affect anyone, and the causes, for at best, I would say we don't know what causes depression. We know what changes in the brain. We know which chemicals or which neurotransmitters are not are imbalanced in the brain, but then what exactly triggers that? It is different things in different people. So Dr. Chinyama has given you those which we are able to identify, but there are those things which we are also not able to identify. But I must add also here quickly that there's a seemingly a common pathway with depression and a number of other diseases. So you find that when you have, let's say, one disease, and then you have depression on it, your depression worsens the disease. And if you have depression, you have this particular kind of disease, it worsens the depression. So there's a serious interaction that happens at a level where we are not always able to pinpoint and say, aha, here is where it went wrong and here is what has caused it. But just know that depression can affect even those that are rich. You find that, and sometimes you find that there are people whose depression is triggered by a good thing. They are now, like they have made it in life. You've won the election you've always wanted, and then somehow you don't feel as accomplished or as established as you thought you would feel, and the next thing you start going into depression. So it's not always the bad, it can be the good and the neutral. It is never known when depression can strike. So anyone can be affected by depression. Nothing like, no, a pastor is stronger than anyone. He encourages people. Even pastors will get depression. Even those people we consider strong in society. Sometimes I even say it's the strongest that are actually even more vulnerable to developing depression.
Now, both of you touched on something that I'd like you to clarify before we start taking questions from the audience. It's the issue to do with COVID. The relationship between COVID and depression. What have you observed? Dr. Genevieve, you can start, then we finish.
Okay, so with COVID, research is still coming in, and we are still getting more and more information about it. But remember that if whether you want to look at it from just the anxiety that COVID introduced and the kind of lifestyle that we now have to start living, we are told distance yourself from other people. Find yourself, if you can, stay home, don't go out, don't go and socialize. Already those that predisposes you to developing depression. So there's the fact that everyone is worried about COVID. Everyone is thinking, okay, what impact will COVID have? Which one of my loved ones will get COVID? That already is predisposing you to how to developing depression. There's things that we're asking you to do to prevent yourself from getting COVID, such as isolating yourself, so people have stopped visiting each other, stopped encouraging each other. Friends are no longer mingling as much as they would. So already that is pushing you towards depression. So COVID has caused us to feel as though we are facing the world on our own. Now, there are also people who've suffered from COVID and every other factor controlled for, but because they have had COVID, they seem to have this depression that follows. And Dr. Chinyama will speak more about that. But then even other than COVID depression, we've seen people who are coming out of the COVID center with, first of all, when those who were admitted, you have to deal with the fact that you saw people around you die. That's, again, a very depressing thing. You came very near death. Very depressing thing where you start asking yourself, so it can be over for me just like that. So all those things will contribute to COVID. So we are thinking the COVID itself, the reaction to the COVID, all those factors can contribute to someone developing the depression.
Dr. Chinyama, COVID and depression, what have you observed?
Yes, so from a psychological point of view, any disease that seemingly has no treatment will bring about we do not have a cure. We do not have a cure for COVID. I think most of the viral infections, you'll find that once someone is just told that the symptoms that you have could be COVID, go and get tested. They develop anxiety. They are not sure whether it's going to be COVID or not. And if it is going to be COVID, they already know it has no cure. And they know that they are going to be quarantined. And they know that once they are quarantined, they'll be isolated from the loved ones. In some cases, there's even a loss of employment. In some cases, there are people that you go into quarantine when actually at home you were maybe suspecting, for those that are married, imagine you were suspecting that your spouse is maybe going out with your neighbor, and then you get quarantined for 2 weeks and you have no contact with your family. That brings in now the anxiety, you fail to handle it, and now you transition into depression. And that can even happen even when you are discharged. You are still not very sure whether you have fully recovered. And so every little physical pain that you are going to have, anything, you become hypervigilant about your life to an extent that now you become even depressed that this COVID has not gone. Thank you.
So now let's take questions from our audience. The first question being from, let me see. So the first question is from Vernon Kibubi. So Vernon is asking, is it only bad news that can cause depression? Any of you can take this question.
Let me start.
Yes, go on, Dr. Chinyama.
Yes, so we have all received bad news before. How do we react to this bad news? People will be sad. When you receive bad news, you're expected to be sad. But how do you handle that sadness? Sadness is temporal, or it can come intermittently. But once this bad news is not handled properly, and you do not seek probably help where you feel like the bad news has now interrupted your activities of daily living, then there now it may cause depression. But if bad news is handled properly, you just remain sad, and over time,
all right, Dr. Chinyama, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I was saying maybe Dr. Benaviv can add. Did you get what I said in the beginning?
We got everything, and then you went silent towards the tail end. So now, Dr. Benaviv, you've seen the question. The question is,
Yes.
Is it only bad news that can cause depression? Dr. Chinyama talked about the fact that mostly it's bad news that can lead to depression. But I think the flip side of this question is that is it possible for someone to receive very good news and still be depressed?
So the short answer to that one will be yes. Remember when I think I even gave an example where I was saying sometimes it might be a good thing that happens to you, but then the good thing kind of overwhelms you to a point where you start thinking, am I worth this good thing happening to me? Am I worth, am I equal to the task? So the example I gave was you win an election, maybe you never thought you would win, and then boom, you have all the powers on your hands. Then you start questioning now to say, am I equal to the task? Will I perform? Will I be good enough for this? So that sometimes starts to, because it can push you into depression. So again, like as the way Dr. Chiyama put it, it's not the bad news itself that will cause the depression, but how you process it, how you handle it, that will cause you to determine whether you're going to depression or not. Similarly, the good news is as well. So there's a lot of the science and the psychology behind it as to how people sometimes will still find a way of interpreting a good thing as being a bad thing and end up going into depression. But then the issue is both good and bad news can cause you to go into depression if they are not processed or handled well.
Thank you. So we have a question from Twambo Chibirika. What is the difference between stress and depression, Dr. Vanaviv?
I was going to say this one is what Dr. Chiyama actually thrives at. You know, like this is like even when he's teaching, he tries to make sure that we understand the difference between stress and depression. So I was going to say this question is for him, unless he wants
Dr.
me to handle it.
No,
let me start and then yes. Let me start and then Dr. Vanaviv will add. So yes, there's a difference and also similarities between stress and depression. Stress, I would say stress is normal. We all undergo stress. There's good stress and bad stress. Stress is how do you handle a situation at that particular time? Do you have the resources with you to handle that particular situation? If you do not have the resources, and in this context, the resources is in the mind. Do you have the ability at that particular time to face this event or this situation before you? Now, and I indicated that there's good stress and bad stress. There's a stress tomorrow that you have an exam, then it makes you realize I didn't study, and then you don't sleep. You study the whole night and tomorrow you pass. That is good stress. The bad stress, I guess this is what Twambo is referring to, is where now, tomorrow there's an exam. You didn't study. You now even fail to go and study. You now start getting all sorts of excuses to an extent that now it becomes a big problem. When we are talking about depression, this is a mental illness, a mental disorder, where now it has affected the function of this individual. If it is not attended to, this individual will not function normally. So they have cognitive impairment. The way they think, the way they behave, and the way and how their emotions are have been impaired. That becomes now a mental problem that we are referring to as depression. I think Dr. Vanaviv can add if I've left out anything.
Okay. I'll just get everything you've said and summarize it this way. So stress, we usually regard stress as a situation where you are challenged, okay? And then you do an appraisal of yourself and you start checking to say, do I have the necessary resource, like he said, to react to this problem? Okay, do I have the capability to handle it? So resource is not always just about the money, but do I have the ability to do this? Okay, and then again, like he said, there's good stress. So you can be stressed by the fact that you've been given 2 job offers. It's a good thing, but then how do you choose between one and the other? You understand? So you feel like you don't have enough within you to make a decision or to just choose one or commit to one. You become stressed. Okay, sometimes you have so much being demanded of you, but you don't have what to give. Maybe there's so much that you need to do, but you don't have the time. You only have 24 hours to a day when maybe you needed 48. That introduces stress. So you always now at this point where like you are always appraising yourself to say, am I able to do this? Do I have enough to do, to overcome this situation? When this now becomes sustained, like you are always stressed and you're not coping with the situation, you end up getting to a point of hopelessness or helplessness, where that is where now depression starts to come in, because you have fallen so short of that bar that maybe you set for yourself, that you feel you are not worth it and there's no way that situation can be helped. And the moment those thoughts kick in, then depression starts at that point. So they are not the same, but one can easily drive you into the other.
Excellent. Now let's go into the final segment of this conversation, treatment. And we'll enter into that segment with a question from Thelma Mbokezi. Her question is, can depression be completely healed? So, starting with Dr. Chinyama, how is depression managed or treated?
Yes, I think Dr. Venavivi will come in on the part of pharmacotherapy, where you treat depression using drugs. I'll talk about psychotherapy. Yes, depression can be completely managed if you seek professional help. So how depression is managed? From our discussion, you realize that we talked so much about symptoms. The psychiatrist, like Dr. Venaviv, will give you medication to take away the physical symptoms, the fatigue that was talked about, the insomnia that was talked about. And then now, when the physical symptoms have been taken away, remember, like we had alluded to in the
Dr. Chinyama,
the problem is in your mind. Oh, yes, I am. Sorry. This problem is in the mind. So we need to deal with these distorted thinking, these distorted thoughts. And so we employ what is called psychotherapy, which is a talk therapy. And to be precise, as psychologists, we use cognitive behavioral therapy, where our target is the irrational thinking of the person who's depressed, is the distorted thinking of this person, so that you capacitate them with the skills and the resources how they should handle this situation. So yes, depression can be properly managed. I think Dr. Venaviv will add.
Dr. Venaviv, what are your thoughts very quickly? We are almost coming to the end of the program. Yeah.
All right. So I'll add that, yes, depression can be treated completely. Okay. Now, again, Dr. Chinyama has put it to say it's a combination of treatments. So we'd like to say there's the biological, psychological, and also the social treatment. The same way depression can be caused by these factors, it's also treated the same way. Okay, so the biological, that is where I come in. I will prescribe medicines that correct that imbalance in the brain that we talked about the neurotransmitters, that will help get back those neurotransmitters into balance, so that the physical aspect of the depression is handled. The psychological, Dr. Chinyama already mentioned about what the psychotherapists will do. They will challenge those thoughts that tend to push you into depression. And then the social also, it's about, again, it's part of the psychotherapy. We talk about trying to make sure that your surroundings are enhanced to give you the best outcome. So we're talking about the friends, the interactions that you have, the family, all those people that surround you, your work environment. If we can't change your work environment, can we change how you interact with it, so that those things which caused you to go into depression are dealt with? So medicines, again, there are several medicines that we use. So different classes and different types of medicines. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I've had sometimes patients come and we give them one type of medicine because it reacted differently, it didn't give us the desired result. They just say, bad medicine, I don't want it anymore. And they think that is the end, I am doomed, there's no help. So you find that from one class of medicines, there are a lot of options, each of them that will work in a different way. So different patients will handle different medicines and will prefer different medicines. You'll be surprised that one patient tells you, this is my favorite drug, this is what I want. And someone else comes and says, that drug is from hell, I don't want it. So we switch them to something else and other classes of medicine. So if you've tried to seek help and it didn't work and you still have residual symptoms, please come back. There's something else that we can try and help you out.
Right, gentlemen, we are almost coming to the end of this conversation. My last question to both of you is, how can someone prevent a depression? Is it preventable? Starting with yourself, Dr. Chinyaka.
Yes, from what we've discussed so far, you realize that yes, depression can be prevented. How? I'll speak from the psychological point of view. Dr. Venaviv talked about interaction with the environment. How do you interact with your environment? So when we are talking about interaction with the environment, is your peers, your family, people that the significant others, people that you think are important in your life. How do you interact with them? So when you have a problem, do not wait until it escalates. Talk with the closest people, share it with the closest person that you can, so that they can now try to give you some of the resources that they have. And Dr. Venavivi indicated that the resources, we're not talking about money. They'll give you ideas. They'll give you different thoughts. And from there, you make an informed decision that will help you. Do not keep everything to yourself. If you keep everything to yourself, there'll be piling, and you are creating a bigger problem. So yes, depression can be prevented if we interact with ourselves, interact with our surrounding, the significant others, and the people that we think are close to us.
Dr. Venaviv, same question. Can depression be prevented, and how?
All right. So there is a lot that we can actually do to prevent depression. Dr. Chinyama, again, has given us an entire spectrum of these things. So at the risk of sounding repetitive, here's a go at it. So number one, it's also about there's the environment that you create around yourself, the people that you surround with, the kind of messages that you keep on receiving, that you keep on feeding your mind. Because you know how sometimes you find you're watching the news and all they're talking about is bad news. And it starts to depress you. You even say, okay, the moment I watch news, I get depressed. So you already know that I'm going to have bad news from there. Switch it off. Change the channel, do something else. You'll know that, if I meet with such and such a person, all they bring me is stress and trauma to my life. So get rid of that person as your friend. Maybe if they're causing you so much pain, you don't need them. Okay. But then at another level, we're talking of also your own lifestyle. It's important that we know how to manage our time, because a lot of the stress that we'll see is because maybe we are not managing our time correctly. So we have so much on our plate, too little time to do it. For me, I always tell my clients to say, one of the words you must practice saying is no. Okay, you must know when to use the word no and say no to something, because it's not being beneficial to you. It's adding to the stress that you are undergoing. Then have a time for yourself as well. Treat yourself good. Make sure that you have some time where you are reflecting. you are also being kind to yourself, you are cheering yourself, and okay, then invest in yourself or your physical well-being as well. We know that sports, okay, or let me just say physical exercise tends to improve your cognition, it improves your mood, so it also reduces your chances of being depressed. So one of the things that we advise people is be physically active, run, jog, okay? One of the other things that we encourage people, like, okay, let's just bring it out there. Have sex as much as you can, but in the correct context. I will not go into the legalities and the moralities of it, but things like sex as the physical component.
So your point is that, doctor, is that one of the things people should engage in to prevent depression is sex.
No, that way when you put it, that it's misconstruing what I am saying. Let me put it this way: sex has components. There's the interactive part. Remember that Dr. Chinyama told us, interact with people, have friends around. So the sex will give you the interactive component. We've also talked about the physical exercise, the physical activity. Sex also gives you that physical activity that you need. Depending on how you do it, you might burn off more calories than others, but at least at the end of the day, it helps you have those feel-good hormones released in the body, and it relieves you of stress and improves your mood. So I'm not prescribing it such that people now start engaging in it as a treatment or as a preventive measure, but just one of those things that actually help.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. And as we close, starting with you, Dr. Chinyama, ending with yourself, Dr. Genevieve, what's your take-home message? What's your last word after all is said and done? Dr. Chinyama.
Yes, so depression is common. There's no one who is immune to depression. We can all be depressed. What is important is that once you feel like you are depressed, seek medical advice. Do not keep things to yourself. Do not keep your problems to yourself. There are people that are there. I think in all health facilities, we do have psychiatrists, we have psychologists. Help is readily available. Do not keep it to yourself. It can be very dangerous if you keep things to yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chinyama. Dr. Genevieve, your last words.
So depression is very common and it can affect everyone. It's a big topic that we can't exhaust in the amount of time that we had. But just know that it will present in very many diverse ways. One of the things that a number of my clients have done is, instead of drinking water, they start drinking beer and all these other substances of abuse that have caused the problem to become worse when they are depressed. Guys, that's not the way to go. When you feel depressed, come and talk to a professional. And then to each and every one of us, when our colleague is depressed, it doesn't mean they are weak. It doesn't mean they are attention seeking. Okay, it is a serious condition. They have no control over it. Please be supportive and be the solution. Help them get, to the professional that will help them out best, but be the supportive system around them. It takes you and me to work together to put an end to suicide by depression. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Genevieve, and enjoy the rest of the evening. I hope that we can have you back on this show in future.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. And today on Ask Dr. Mjajati Sunday, we've been dealing with depression. And if you are dealing with depression yourself, don't feel shy to seek for help. And as we always ask you to do, share this video. We need this information out there as much as possible, because there are a lot of people out there that are struggling with depression, and some are even on the verge of killing themselves. We need to let them know that there's help, and we need to let them know that there's hope and that they're not alone. So click that share button. Make sure that this video goes round as much as possible. And thank you for staying with us up to this time. Until next time with another exciting topic, this has been Dr. Mjajati on Ask Dr. Mjajati Sunday. For healthy and prosperous citizens, do take care, ladies and gentlemen.
What can you do with 5 kwacha? not a lot. A 5 kwacha auto boost can get you 1,900 kwacha extra IO cover. Bernard Mulindu auto boosted, and Bernard received a total payout of 2,070 kwacha when he needed it most. Here is Bernard's story.
My name is Bernard Mulindu. I'm Punkena Moto. Kairi Hospital Church. It's a 5 problem. 296 cash. Ngasanya kwa chat. Wametumira kwa 2 tupilisebe kawira manda kusongera tukala mukuladiki yako datawole bomba alipira kwa nabana ku masukulu aba balipigwa wale bombe tuisuma sana.
Dial star 296 hash to auto boost and quickly grow your IO recharge with care cover each time you recharge. IO together with MTN. IO, because you care.